Welcome to Recross the Paths. My name is Cade. My guest today is Ian of Cuberviews fame. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk with you.
I'm so thrilled to have this chance to share the airwaves again. We met in person through the first CubeCon we were both at, but also just in some of the online spaces, both of us being, how would you say, given to counters projects at different times.
Yes, we both are online a lot on Reddit and Discord, I'd say, and we both have similar tastes in magic ideas and cards.
Yeah, there's something fun when you find kindred spirits in a number of ways, especially in this design space. And I've really enjoyed seeing a lot of what you've done, and especially seeing your own project, Cuberviews, which we're going to get into a little bit later on. But especially in the actual cube space, that you do a lot of things that I really enjoy as well.
Yeah, and it's been a lot of fun doing this project. We're going to talk about it more, Cube Reviews, and your episode should probably be coming a couple weeks or a few weeks after this. We'll see. Stay tuned.
Yeah, time in the podcast space is very strange, so it'll happen eventually.
Yes.
So even though we really linked initially over, you have a proliferate cube that explores the broad variety of counters available in Magic. I have a cube that also focuses on particular counter types. We're going to go a little bit different direction today because I wanted to explore a tricolor cube that you have. I've talked to a couple people about their three color projects, but I really wanted to crack open the Bant Cube. Can you give us an overview of this project?
Yeah, so this is not my first cube. I've built many cubes before, proliferate, legacy, peasant cubes, and so like a couple years ago, I had my second legacy cube, and we drafted it many times at my game store. It was called the Reality Chip Cube because I built it totally based around the card, the Reality Chip, after listening to a Lucky Paper episode where they said, Build a cube around a card." That really resonated with me.
It's kind of that seed crystal idea, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. And that cube, as happens with me often when I don't put a restriction on myself, kind of got lost. I just didn't really know where to go with it anymore. The power level, I got confused what to do with it. So that cube, I ended up taking it apart just based off of my ideas and my player feedback. And after I built that cube, I said, well, what do I do now? Because I always am thinking up new cube projects. And I was looking around and I saw that people have been building tricolor cubes and color restricted cubes. And I said, this is so fun. And I thought, what would be a three color for me? And then I realized I play Bant in every format. I mean, Commander, I've built many Bant decks. In Modern, I play Soul Herder, which is now not really a very good deck anymore. Uh, in Legacy, I've played like Bant Control. In Pioneer, I've played Bant weird decks. So I just love Bant value or control or anything Bant really. And I thought, you know, I should try building a color restricted cube, and Bant just sounds like the right colors for me. And so, as I do with many of my cube projects, I don't really sit down in front of a computer or Scryfall and just look up cards for hours, which I know a lot of people do, which is very much a strategy that's totally fine to do. What I often do is I've been playing Magic a long time, so I have a huge collection. So I just sit down in front of my binders and binders of bulk rares or old commander decks or legacy decks or whatever, and I just go through and pull out cards, and a few hours later, there was like 300 cards in front of me, and the Bant Cube was born.
That's amazing. I know so many of us get into this digital space of building spreadsheets or making lists, but boy, to go from, if not ideation, like an inspiration to perhaps a functional cube in just a matter of hours is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do because I'm online a lot. I'm a software engineer. I play a lot of video games. I'm online all the time. So, magic is one of my favorite hobbies because it's a paper hobby. Sure, I play it online a little bit, but there's just something beautiful about just pulling out boxes of cards and just flipping through them for hours and having stacks of cards in front of me and then seeing, oh, maybe this is a cube right here. Who knows?
Do you think this one was easier to put together than any others just because of your predilection for the color set?
It was probably easier because I naturally own a lot of Bant cards because I just play Bant in every format. So it was like, oh, Soul Herder, I have this. This is great. Ephemerate, Eternal Witness. And then I just had tons of cards. I built a lot of cubes, like I said. And one of the reasons that really stick with the project is when I actually own the cards already for it. Like if I'm going through my collection and I have an idea of a cube and I only end up pulling out 50 cards because I just don't own a lot of stuff for it yet, I say, this project sounds like a lot of work. I think I'm going to give up on it. But the Bant Cube, I pulled out like 400 or 500 cards over just a course of a few hours because I've just played Bant in so many formats and for such a long time that I just had so many cards sitting around. And I kind of wanted this cube to be a showing of my love for Bant colors. So it worked out perfectly.
You are, I would say at this point, a known lover of ETBs and value generation over time. And you noted coming out of a project that was centering around a card like the reality chip, how do you start thinking about power level in an environment like this where you're going to have a lot of these, I don't know if you want to call it recursive, but repeatable value engines?
Yeah, I think that one thing that I often do when I'm trying to figure out what the base power level of my cube when I'm building it should be is one, when I'm just pulling out cards in my collection, how strong they look. I just was kind of pulling out some of my favorite cards that I've played for years in Bant, like Force of Will and Tinker and Jace the Mind Sculptor.
I hear those are pretty good.
Yeah. And like I said, I played in Legacy and Modern and also just like some of my favorite fun cards that I wanted to make work. Like I wanted to be able to recreate Soul Herder in here. So I had Collected Company, Ephemerate, Solitude, the Pitch Elementals, and I also wanted to make my control deck that I played work. So I had like Jace the Mind Sculptor and Counterspell and but I definitely it's a process because, like I say, I pull out a ton of cards, 400 or 500 cards, and some of the cards are more powerful than others. So I pulled out fast mana. I have just like Mana Vault. I had Mana Crypt. I had Chrome Mox. And then I also had on the lower power level, just like fun commons from, I don't know, Battle for Zendikar that I just had sitting around. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And slowly, as I just put together the cards and I put them into different piles, like I always just have like strips of cards. Like I'll have all the white cards in one pile in one section, all the blue, all the red, all the green, and I'll also separate them by what they do. Like I'll put, oh, here are removal spells, here are aggro creatures, here are control spells, and then as I just trim away, like, oh, these are the worst cards, like this random common or mana drain probably is a little too strong. Power level prevails. It kind of a cube just appears, you know?
Yeah, I was wondering because, like, looking through the list, seeing cards like you mentioned Tinker and the ability to tinker out something like Portal to Phyrexia, living alongside, I don't know, you have your like Springheart Nantuko that's certainly part of a combo with like Nadu or something like that. But how do you go about making that work with cards like Setessan Champion or Maloku of the Clouded Mirror?
Yeah. I've been doing this cube for, I think, 2 or 3 years now, and it's very different from when I first created it. Like I said, it started off with just cards that I had lying around. So the power level was all over the place. Maybe different decks weren't fully created. I always have like ideas of combinations of cards that could be fun or different archetypes that could be cool, but it kind of just appears over time often, especially with this project, which is kind of just my love of Bant put into a box. And after I build the initial cube, which is just stuff lying around that I have, maybe I get a couple more shock lands or something that I don't have. And we do the first playthrough, the first couple playthroughs with my play group, and we say, oh, these cards stink, or these cards are way too good. I think that that's actually the most fun part about it because it starts at 360 And then after the first playthrough, there are 50 cards that my playgroup says these are way too good or way too horrible and get them out of here immediately. And then I write down all those cards, and then that's 50 more cards that I get to put in the cube. It's great. And then you just iterate through that 100 times and you end up at something that's hopefully balanced in some way.
That's a really optimistic way to think about it too, right? This is providing a lot of opportunity for innovation and further design as it goes.
Yeah, and my playgroup has some very vocal players. As as you've if you've listened to Cuberviews, there are a lot of cube designers in my playgroup. Like last night we did cube and we had 7 people show up and 6 of us brought a cube. So some so some very vocal cube players and cube designers. So when they see something they don't like, they're not afraid to say, "Cut this card, add this. This is horrible. Change this." It's fun. It's like a really community driven part of it also.
That's so good. Well, you were noting kind of with the adding and subtracting cards at a time, the current count for the cube is 405, which is not a number I see very often. How did you land there?
Yeah, so there's one card that I have to include, or 2 cards that I have to include in basically all of my cubes. Because when I first started playing Vintage and Legacy Cube at my game store, Games IRL, if you're in the area in Avon, Connecticut, go to it. My store owner, Eric, he had his legacy vintage cube. It was like a foiled out vintage cube. It was awesome. And he just loved adding strange cards to it that I've fallen in love with, like Arcane Savant, Conspiracies, and 2 cards that he always had was Lore Seeker and Cogwork Librarian. So my cubes basically almost always have 375 as the minimum because you got to put in 15 more cards for Lore Seeker.
Yep.
And then from there, sometimes some cubes include booster tutors. That's another 15 cards. And then I just like to have a little bit of fun with it because when somebody opens up the Lore Seeker pack or the Booster Tutor pack, if it's exactly 375, it's going to be the same 15 cards that they get out of the pack every time. And I think it's fun to have a little bit of variance in there. I think it's cool to have variance in your cube. Some of my cubes are exactly 360 or 180, depending on my project. And sometimes I just want to have more fun cards. And the number changes over time. Like the queue was actually recently 410 and I cut 5 cards because I recently tried to use cube jigs and with 410 there were 5 cards that were extra when I put everything into these 15 cards. So I said I got to cut 5 to make it all the cards fit into these packs. So I wouldn't say it's a science for me.
Well, no, I mean, you've gotten down to the heart of it. It's like yeah, we want a little bit of the flex room, but also it needs to fit in the box. Like there's there's a real numbers game here.
It's got to fit in the box, of course.
Well, speaking of the numbers game, Bant being 3 color, of course, you currently have about 15% of your cube is lands or is mana fixing. Do you want to promote a lot of multicolor play? Are you hoping that players will gravitate to one color, or does it become bigger than that?
So my philosophy with fixing might be a little different than other people. I know some people think that when you include too many lands or too powerful lands, people are going to go 5 color and it encourages people. I have a little bit of a different thought process that I think that people will play what they want to play. I played a lot of limited chaos draft and when I do Chaos Draft, once every 3 packs, you see a gain life land enters tapped or some horrible duel. I still go 5 color. I'm gonna make it
they
work.
they can't stop you. Nobody can stop you, Ian.
And I think that everyone kind of does that. If somebody wants to play 2 color and splash some third fun card that they see in a pack, they're going to make it work. Or if somebody wants to go 5 color, they're going to go 5 color. People just have decks that they like to play, or they have strategies that they like to go for, or someday they're feeling spicy and they see Niv Mizzet in the pack and they say 5 color time. And so I think it's fun to just include a lot of fixing because when you have a lot of fixing, people aren't punished when they try and go for that craziness. So this cube, I have 61 lands that are multicolored, some additional lands that are single colored, and I try to make the fixing good. I have two of every shock land. I have multiple fetches. So I think it's just a good idea to have ample fixing. So the players who love to draft fixing, like me, the other day I was doing a cube draft and my first 5 picks were fetches. I'm
Amazing.
I love that stuff. So if players love to draft fixing, they can take fixing. If somebody who likes fixing, then they can let the other people get it. And I think that's fun.
Do you find that your players respond well to that? Like, do you find your folks are wanting to touch on more colors in a draft?
Yeah, I mean, we have a wide variety of different people in our group. There's a lot of 2 color decks, aggro decks, 5 color decks. It's whatever people are feeling. Plus, I like to go 5 color a lot, so I like to have good fixing for when I go 5 color. Uh, so it's a little bit of bias there, I'd say.
Well, I mean, you did put it together, so it would make sense that it would have your fingerprints on it.
Yes. But of course, this cube doesn't actually have 5 colors. It's Bant. But I still want people to, if they want to play Bant, play Bant.
Or does it not have 5 colors, Ian?
That's the difficult question. So there are off-color lands, which is something that's been pretty contentious with my playgroup. After I built this cube, I built my Rakdos cube because basically I said I want to take it as a challenge to myself. I built a Bant cube. I love Bant. What about the colors that I don't like? Rakdos. So I built the Rakdos cube, and in that cube, it's strictly Rakdos. But in this cube, there are some off-color lands that let you technically get other colors. For example, I have the off-color triomes, like the Esper Triome, Naya Triome, Temur Triome. And then I also have some other lands that let you get other colors, like City of Brass, for example, Mana Confluence, and then also things like Birds of Paradise or Deathrite Shaman. Speaking of Deathrite Shaman,
I was
because
gonna say, Deathrite Shaman, not officially banned.
every card in this cube can be played with the Bant colors. But some of them get better when you can play other colors. Like for example, Golos. I gotta have Golos in basically all my cubes. I love Golos. Another card that I love. But Golos, it's great because there's a lands archetype in this cube where you're playing things like Field of the Dead. So it's good just for the ETB find a land, but it's fun to be able to activate it. And I think it's kind of like an achievement unlocked to be able to say, I'm in the Bant Cube, but I also have red and black mana, and so I can activate Golos. And there's some other cards that also get improved by being able to play other colors. For example, Prismatic Ending. It has Converge. So if you are in Bant, you can only do it for 3 colors. But it's just really fun when occasionally somebody has that triome that they're playing because it's blue green, but it also has black. And then they hit Jace the Mind Sculptor, which costs 4. And then they're like, oh, this is fun. Also, I think it's fun to have activated abilities outside of the colors that make the card better. Like I said, Deathrite Shaman. Deathrite Shaman, it's a great mana dork. There's double fetches in here. And the green ability to exile creatures is strong, but it's also fun to be able to occasionally activate the black ability and be able to exile an instant or sorcery. Also, things like, what is the name of it? Chatterfang, which is
Yeah.
really strong in here with Forest Walk. But being able to pay black and sacrifice the squirrels is really good.
Now, see, this sounds like your legacy play experience coming through. I remember a good friend of mine in when I was playing Legacy more regularly was really big on the. Usually it was Bant centric, but this 4 color control pile that was almost always playing these off color triomes so that you could activate Prismatic Ending for higher mana values, or I think at the time so that you could cast Fourth Ear Lingus. But having those things that are off of your core colors still felt particularly Bant somehow.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun. Like you said, prismatic ending, but also, for example, leyline binding. It improves with domain. By having those off-color triomes, you can get it to 1 mana, and then it becomes even stronger. So I've just found it to be a lot of fun. When I was originally thinking about, do I want to include other colors? At first, I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll throw in some truly off-color cards. Like, for example, one guy in my playgroup has a mono blue cube. You can only get islands at the end, but there are lands you can draft that let you play other colors. Like there are triomes or shocks or duels that let you go into green or the other colors. And then they have really strong power outliers that let you play those other colors, like Ren and Six or Minsk and Boo. So originally I was thinking, oh, should I also include cards like Ren and Six, which is great, or Fallen Shinobi, one of my other favorite cards. But I ended up keeping it as all Bant cards with some fun light splashes.
So then those colors are more like upgrades to your Bant things rather than access to non-Bant things.
Yeah, like if you take the time to draft a Triumph that lets you play black, a couple of your cards get improved.
So you mentioned it some as you were talking about here, like maybe lands or domain or something like that. Do you think of the Bant Cube as being built around archetypes, or do you try to strive for broader connections?
Yeah, I definitely, when I'm building my cubes and when I'm laying out all the cards on my floor and it's a mess, try and think about connections between the cards. I'm thinking about, oh, I pulled out Collected Company. What would a Collected Company deck look like? And then I start thinking about other formats that have played Collected Company, like Pioneer. There was the Green White Angels deck or my Soul Herder deck. But I also definitely think in archetypes too. Like I think about fun cards that could be made playable if there was an archetype built around it. For example, I have Miracles in here, being able to play like Entreat the Angels, which is a card that's a little bit a relic of the past. It's not as strong now, I would say, but if you do Miracle it, it's really good. Also, like Temporal Mastery, too. So, there are definitely archetypes. I do it also to make sure that I'm including a balance of different types of decks to exist. Like, when I first built the cube, aggro wasn't very good. And so I put a lot of work and effort into adding a lot of mono white aggro cards. That was definitely one way that there's definitely an archetype, mono white aggro, but it was also to broaden the spectrum of macro archetypes.
I like that as a way to think about that too, where it's not just what is a control deck and what is an aggro deck here, but what does this kind of deck look like? Like you described, what does a collected company deck look like? And then you can say, does this next deck feel like what I've already put in? Or does it feel different?
Yeah, exactly. Expand upon the macro archetypes by giving them more of a design, like +1/+1 counters, or miracles, or a little bit of equipment, or artifacts. It's a lot of fun.
Ian, talk a bit about the role of combo in the Bant Cube.
Yeah, so I think combo plays a big role in here because sometimes the decks just end up being value piles. Sure, I've tried to put in different archetypes, but sometimes it's just value piles or just control decks staring at each other. And it's a Bant cube. Let's be honest, sometimes you go to time. It can be long games.
Who'd believe that?
Yeah. So I think it's really fun to include little combos in the cube. Maybe some of the cards are a little underpowered, but when you put them together, you get a really strong insta win. For example, I have Scurry Oak and Rosy Cotton. Both of those cards fit into their own decks. Like Scurry Oak is great in counters, it's great in tokens, and Rosie is great in like little game objects decks, like creating food and tokens, and also works with 1/1 counters also. But when you put them together, you get a combo. I think that's a lot of fun. And I have some other weird, like pseudo combos. Like there was one drafter who I had this in the cube for a long time, and finally somebody did it. I have Knight of the Reliquary and Retreat to Coral Helm. Both of those cards are interesting on their own. Retreat to Coral Helm is good in lands decks. It's scries, so it's good in like the miracle decks. And also Knight of the Reliquary is good in the lands decks. It is able to find your really interesting payoffs for lands like Field of the Dead or Gaia's Cradle, for example. But when you put them both together, you get a combo that you tutor all the lands on your deck and you get a 20/20. And that deck went like 2/1. So I think it's a lot of fun to have little hidden combos that are really strong and fun. But as long as the cards are all good on their own.
And I think for combo, that doesn't explicitly mean like these two cards win the game together, but there are going to be some number of things that at least push your game toward a conclusion.
Exactly. I think it's a little bit of a joke in my play group that people call it, "Oh, that's an Ian Braverman combo," and it's not an actual combo, it's just 2 cool cards that are fun together.
I'm sure a lot of ink has been spilled about what is and isn't a combo, but and I can see that here where you have a couple of cards that you would expect to see with something else. I know you reference in your overview some things you can do with things like Eternal Witness or Archaeomancer that want to repeat a couple of things. But it seems like once you build those, most of them are aiming to end the game. That's what I was getting to.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The idea is you get these cards together and you win the game. One of my favorite decks from Modern years ago was in 2019. I played Saheeli Cat Combo. It
Oh
was
yeah.
Jeskai Cat Combo, and it was a control deck with a combo finish. That's just one of my favorite archetypes that I love. You just play hard control, and then you put Saheeli and Cat together and you win. That's so fun.
I remember shortly after the banning for that deck in standard, a cosplayer showed up at one of the Grands Prix dressed as Saheeli, and she was carrying around a sign that said, "Have you seen my cat?"
Oh, that's
So-
so good. That's so sad.
yeah, the two card combos. I know that's something that's really polarizing for a lot of designers because some of them don't like I don't know, kind of the immediacy of, all right, well, you've assembled these two things, the game's over.
Yeah, I just like to see big splashy things happen. Sometimes people come up to me when they're playing my cube and say, "Ian, he did this ridiculous thing and he instantly won the game." And I was just like, "That's sick." And then I like give a thumbs up to the person who did it. So I'm a little bit of an evil person. So
I don't think it's evil. I think there's just value in that being a way that some people enjoy playing.
yeah, you upheaval, and then there's no upheaval in here. It's too good. But you upheaval, you bounce other lands, and you play like a 3 drop, and it's great. That's my kind of magic.
If we were cheering on upheaval, I was going to have to rescind what I was saying about you not being evil.
I'm a little evil. In college, my favorite commander deck was Brago hard stacks. That it was
Ooh,
just Winter Orbs, Stasis. It was bad, but it was great.
I know different folks at different times have talked about the value of having restrictions to help guide you in your building process. With having such a broad spectrum of available ads in something like Bant, a full two-thirds of your color options, does that make it easier or more difficult to make changes to the cube, you think?
I would say that it makes it a little bit more difficult. Like I said earlier, I had my reality chip cube, and that cube had almost no restriction. It was just a powerful legacy cube that was originally built around this card reality chip. So I always had this idea in my head that I wanted the reality chip to be playable in it. But that cube just got away from me because I just didn't know what to add anymore. I would see a new card and I would say, "Oh, is this fun?" I don't know. And another thing is I have a lot of cubes. I think I have 9 cubes right now. So I don't really design or make changes to my cubes probably in the same way that other people do who would just have 1 cube. I more am just looking through the spoilers and I say, this card's perfect for Bant. This card's better for Rakdos. This card's perfect for my Bolt Cube. So I often just pick up cards from people when I see them in a trade binder. I'll just be looking through people's trade binder and say, oh, this card looks fun in Bolt Cube. I'll try and fit it in. And then I'll pick it up. And when I get to it like a week later, I'll pull out the Bolt Cube and say, how can I make this fit? So I wouldn't say that I'm as calculated as other people when I'm making changes to the cubes over time.
No, but that sounds like a natural outpouring of your process, right? Like if you were building it by here's what I have and here's what I'm interested in, well, then it would only make sense that changes would happen that way too.
Yeah, exactly. Like occasionally I'll check up Scryfall or something. For example, my new trinket cube that I'm building that we tested for the first time last night, I was looking up 0 and 1 mana artifacts that would make sense for the trinkets. But for the most part, something like Bant Cube, it's more just I see a new awesome Bant card that I think fits in the power band and I'll just throw it in. Also, another thing is because my play group I mentioned is so large with so many cubes, my cubes get drafted like once every 6 months. So sometimes I'll just put a cube on the back burner for a month or two and say, I'll just bring one of my other cubes a following week. So often it's just I accumulate cards I think could be really fun. in each of my cubes, and when I get to it, I'll make the changes.
I think that's going to be a really validating thing for some people to hear. I think often we get to talk to folks who have projects that get drafted weekly in some cases, or online with some regularity. I think there's something nice about a project that you are passionate about, that you work on, and that you work to make your best, but that it spends a lot of time on the shelf, and that's okay.
Yeah, my focus changes over time. Like right now, I'm working on the trinket cube, and that's been my main focus. So some of my other cubes will be put on the back burner. And then one week I'll say, oh, I would really love to play Bant Cube right now. So I'll take the Bant Cube out. I'll look through my trade binder of cards that I've opened from packs lately, and I'll say, oh, these all seem great for the Bant Cube, and I'll just put them in. I mean, of course, sometimes there's more of a structure to it. Sometimes after a draft, somebody will say, you should definitely add this card to the cube, or this card's way too good, and I'll take it out and I'll like make a more calculated attempt to add something to it. But often it's just be at my game store and I'll pull out cards that seem fun and throw it in the cube.
I think that's a really cool approach. When you bake with a recipe, you know how it's going to turn out if you're following the recipe exactly anyway. But if you're exploring a little bit, you may discover new things you enjoy.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Definitely.
Are there design principles that you applied to this project that carry over into the other things you're working on?
Definitely. I would say that every time I design a new cube, I learn lessons from it. For example, the proliferate cube. When I first built that cube, it was horrible. I'll be honest. It was unplayable. I had drafters walk away mid draft
Ooh,
and say, this was not good. I don't like it. So, this cube, when I first built it, it was definitely a little value good stuff decks because it was just some of my favorite Bant cards. Sure, I thought, oh, I'll put control pieces, I'll put an aggro pieces, but a lot of the decks often were mid range soup extended. So that was when I decided, I do need to actually really focus on making sure that different types of strategies will be present. So I focused hard to put mono green ramp. I focused hard to put mono white aggro artifacts. And that's a lesson that I've definitely taken to my other cubes when I've been building them. That often when I build one of my cubes and I have archetypes in mind, strategies will kind of just appear and players will surprise me. But sometimes, especially with something like Bant, that's pretty well known to just be like value piles, you need to put in a little bit more effort to make sure that the decks are interesting.
yeah, I imagine there's a version of it that's like, well, these are all soul herders and mull drifters and or cloud blazers, and we're all having a great time, but we're all spinning our wheels in the same direction.
I would definitely say that the cube looked a little bit like that, and it took effort to make sure that it wasn't just that.
As you consider the Bant Cube, certainly as it bleeds over into your other designs as well, what advice would you offer to other folks who are working on their own projects?
Yeah, I would say don't get too in your own head. I've definitely spoken to other people in my play group and said, you should design a cube. Try it. You'll have a lot of fun. For example, there's one guy in my play group who is so meticulous and calculated. He says, oh, in the legacy cube, this is no normal legacy cube. Every archetype is exactly 3 colors, and I looked at every card and saw how it interacted with every other card in the cube. And it takes him, I don't know, 6 months, a year before he has the cube first list even together. And one thing that Sam Black said, which definitely spoke to me, was sure, the cube curator has all these ideas when they're building it, but the players end up drafting what they want to play. The players find the real strategies. The cube curator often they have all these big ideas for what strategies they want to include, but they don't end up actually appearing often. Like, oh, I put in an enchantress, but it turns out it was horrible, so nobody drafted it. Or it turns out there was some 2 card combo that's insane and just it went 3-0 that I didn't think about. So, sure, you can spend months and months and months calculating and trying to make the perfect list that's perfectly balanced and every card is the same power level. But I think it's fun to just put cards into a box and go with it. I think it's interesting when there are power outliers. When there's cards that are really strong and too good, but they spawn a really interesting deck. I think that's great. One of the least interesting things about Cube is when you look at a pack and it's 15 cards and you look at it and you say, I don't even know what to take here. I mean, every card is just some value creature or removal spell, and there's no power outliers, and it's all balanced. I think it's fun to have some exciting corner cases in your cube, to have some cards that are too strong and get people excited. So I would say don't work for months and months and months to design your cube before even getting the first card. I just go through my collection, pull cards out, and hopefully something fun emerges. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Well, it sounds like it's worked out. I mean, it's something that your players have really resonated with, and it sounds like other folks have enjoyed as well.
Well, I built some bad cubes before. I've taken apart some cubes, like that reality chip cube. It was not interesting.
Well, Ian, in addition to your prolific designs and hanging out with your local Cube group, you are also the host of Cuberviews, an interview podcast that's working to highlight what different people are doing with their own Cube projects. Talk a little bit about how you got into that.
Yeah, so I previously was a financial advisor, and as a financial advisor, I really liked working with clients one on one. I would have conversations about getting to know them, their goals, and I really liked having those conversations, and it was a lot of fun for me. But then I switched careers. Now I'm a software engineer, and I kind of internally missed just having those conversations with people and really getting to know people. I also have a lot of experience in acting and singing and being on stage. So I've always liked being on a stage or performing. So I think that it was just multiple things coming together. And I've wanted to do something like this for a little while now, but I just couldn't think of the right thing. And I know a lot of podcasts have 2 people on, and I couldn't find a friend who wanted to consistently do it every week. And then I had the idea, and listening to your podcast also, oh, I've had so many friends say, I'll come on an episode or 2, sure, why not? I can't do it every week. So the interview style just fit perfectly, and having a different guest on every week. So this was just a really fun way for me to talk with my playgroup regularly, discuss the cubes in my playgroup, and then also meet new people and get introduced to people around the cube community. And it's been a lot of fun.
I was going to note that I really love how you started out with that too of engaging with the people in your play group. Cube designers like to talk about their own projects, but giving them a platform to do that was really cool. And then getting to hear kind of the local scene of what's going on and what is your group doing that's unique in its own way.
Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, I have a very vocal playgroup. I'm also pretty vocal. I'm not afraid to, after the draft, be like, this was a train wreck. This cube needs some work. And this was just another way that I could bring on my friends and grill them on their cubes. But I'm not been joking. It's been just a lot of fun having them on, talking to them, and there's still people in my play group that I'm going to be having on and interviewing, and it's been fun also, like I said, getting to know more people.
What is something that you've learned through kicking off this interview process that you didn't expect?
I would say something that I didn't expect was the amount of work it would be. When I first started this, thought it was just going to be, all right, I'm going to get in front of the microphone. My friend will get in front of the microphone. Three, two, one, go. And then I realized there's a lot more to it that is work, but it's also been fun. Like, I write very big outlines that I send to people with questions that I plan to ask them. So that takes, I don't know, an hour or two. I spend hours editing. So it's been a lot more work than I expected. That's something I would say to people who might be thinking about their podcast. Sure, you can just record and put it on, but it's been fun learning about the different ways that I can improve the listener experience.
Ian's the only one that can see me smiling right now. Yeah, there is a lot of work that can go into that, but there's also a lot of space for people to approach that in different ways. Somebody like Joe Anderson, who takes a kind of an avant-garde approach to capturing the moment, versus somebody like yourself who puts in a lot of elbow grease to make sure that the outcome is something specific that you're after.
Yeah, and I think it also being the interview style. The other person that I'm interviewing, sure, maybe they've listened to an episode of my podcast, maybe they haven't, but often when I send them the outline of the episode, it is supposed to give them a good idea of what the podcast will be like, what they should expect. And then also, some people are very well spoken, some people are not. So some people I have to put in a little more work into the editing, and that's fine. It's been a relaxing experience just spending a few hours on a weekend editing.
Well, everyone has their own voice, and I mean that both as like their literal voice, but also just how they speak and how they communicate ideas.
Definitely. Totally agree.
So, Ian, what have you found most rewarding about putting these interviews together?
There's been a lot of things that have been really rewarding for me. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to Cube podcasts like yours, Lucky Paper Radio, Uber Cube. I listen to Commander Magic podcasts like the Command Zone. When I'm driving, I have a lot of time, or when I'm making food or on a walk. And so it's been fun listening to my own podcast and saying, I made this. This sounds good. I re listen to my own episodes and say, this is great. I'm really proud that I was able to make this. So it's also been fun to be able to bring up to other people that, hey, I have a podcast now if you want to listen. And like I was at my game store last night and it was somebody I haven't seen in years who plays Magic. And he's a busy guy and we don't get to talk very much, but he said, "Oh, I'll check out your podcast. That's fun." And it's also just been rewarding to see something grow, like seeing the viewership grow or the interactions with listeners or also the different guests that I'm bringing on, like really fun people. It's been an overall very cool experience.
How has this exercise made you a better designer, having talked to a number of new people?
I would say that it's definitely made me a better designer in many ways. Learning different perspectives that different cube owners have. My podcast is very much focused on the designing aspect because I design so many cubes. I'm always trying to pick up little pieces of information. For example, the episode that I had with Ken Olson, which was talking about modifying existing cubes, for a while I was talking to them about why don't you just build a cube from scratch? I don't understand. Why are you not wanting to do that? And learning about Ken's experience taking a cube and modifying it was really eye-opening to me. And also, for example, episodes like with the Strictly Worst cube with Connor. That cube has changed a lot over time, and I also hadn't played it for periods because he would go to school, and it was just really fun learning about how Connor's perspective has changed on the cube. So I think I'm just taking a lot of little lessons about, hey, there's a lot of different approaches that you can take to building a cube. But like I said, as long as you build something, you put it together, you don't get too in your own head. And if your play group hates it, they hate it. And then it's a lesson, and then you go on to the next thing.
Well, for what it's worth, it's been really a joy to see what you're doing with Cuberviews, to see how you are expanding, like you said, beyond your own play group and starting to get to connect with so many folks around the cube space. It's a really cool project, and if folks aren't listening to that, they definitely should be.
Thank you. I appreciate the shout out.
As we trend toward wrapping up here, I get to ask one of my favorite questions, which is if you could have any card printed as a promo, what card would you pick and who would you have do the illustration?
So I think people aren't going to be surprised when I say a blink card. So I think Soul Herder. I love the original art of Soul Herder. It's just haunting and creepy,
Seb McKinnon.
cool. Yeah. But I would love to see additional perspectives on what that card could look like. I really like the old school style of Magic cards. I've been playing for a while, and so I love seeing the old border and old art. So something like RK Post perspective on it would be really fun. I would say that I'm somebody who just likes to see a wide variety of Magic art. I don't hone in on particular artists as much, but if I see something that's cool, I like it. So if I can just get additional perspectives on Soul Herder, get like 10 different arts, I'd love it.
Just a full suite of different soul herders.
Yes, and then I can pick from the litter my favorite, just put in my queue.
That's excellent. Well, Ian, as we said, folks should definitely be listening to Cube Reviews. But if people want to follow up on any of the other projects you're working on or perhaps get in touch, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I'm in a lot of different Cube Discords, so send me a message on Discord. I like to post on Reddit, for example. I like to interact with Pack One Pick Ones on like the MTG Cube Reddit group. So definitely reach out through there and check me out on CubeCobra. I have all my cubes on my CubeCobra page. I'm not a huge social media user. I wouldn't say look me up on Twitter or anything, but reach out on Discord. And my name is just Ian Braverman on Discord. I'm not very creative.
Perfect. And we'll have links for all of that below. Well, Ian, this has been a delight, and I so appreciate you taking your time to share with us here. This has been so much fun to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great having you on Cuberviews. And another thing that I didn't say before that has been really fun with doing this project is getting to know other content creators in the space. I don't think I ever expected to be on a Cube interview podcast. So it's really fun to be on this, and thank you for having me.